All right, welcome everyone. We're gonna give people a few minutes before we begin. So if you'd like, you can go ahead in the chat and send a message to the panelists and everyone attending as to where you're coming from. Hello from Oakland, Boston, Tokyo. Oh, we're international. Oh, welcome, welcome. Yeah. Hello, everyone. We're just going to be giving all the participants a few more minutes, and then we will begin shortly. Hello from Los Angeles, Boston, St. Louis, Missouri. Never been there. Canada, Malaysia. Hello, everyone. Welcome in. Ireland and Mexico and India. You guys, this is so awesome. Woo, welcome. Welcome to people from Florida and Wisconsin. Nairobi. It's pretty impressive. San Francisco too. Hello again and welcome. We are still gonna give everyone a few minutes to come in. And again, as you can see in the chat that people are writing where they're coming from. Hello and welcome from Kentucky, Seattle, California, NYC, Arizona, SoCal. All right, so we're gonna give it one more minute before we officially begin. But welcome, welcome to Australia, whoever's coming from Australia, that's awesome. Oh, I just had my first deep dish pizza. Fantastic. Chicago, shout out. Awesome. Okay, so I wanted to welcome everyone to this panel, and I'm going to go ahead and first hand this off to Stephanie, the organizer of this event from Superposition.
Hi everyone, my name is Stephanie Sue and I'm the lead director of Superposition, an international nonprofit bridging the gender gap in STEM. I'll do a quick introduction in a little bit, but first I want to give a huge shout out to Julia Fernandez and Vicky for helping me organize this amazing event. Clearly we have people from all over the world and it's so exciting to see that everyone is uniting in this time where everything can be especially isolating. So first, I'll be handing it back to Julia and they can talk about the inspiration for this event.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Stephanie. So hello, everyone. My name is Julia Fernandez. I am going to be your moderator. So hello, everyone. My name is Julia Fernandez. I am going to be your moderator to be with you all today. And a graphic design student. Should we stop? Stop. I just want to make sure that I'm not echoing anymore. Awesome. Okay, sweet. So again, hello, my name is Julia Fernandez. Sorry about that technical difficulty. I'm a graphic design student from the Academy of Art University in San Francisco. Although I'm a graphic design student, I am focused on product and UX design. So I'm very happy to be here as I'm one of the target audiences actually for this panel. Go ahead, Vicky.
Hey everyone, so sorry. I have some technical difficulty, so that's why I'm on two different computers now. But yeah, I just want to say thank you everyone for coming. And my name is Vicky and I'm one of the panel organizers. So I think next we would like to, give the panelists a quick introductions about themselves. And so yeah, let's go ahead.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is we're going to have each panelist just say their name, what company they're interning for, and as well as what school they go to. So we're going to go in this order, and we're going to go straight ahead and let each panelist speak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so here again, my name is Vicky Vo, and I'm currently interning at DoorDash as a product design intern. My current, the school that I'm attending is San Jose State, which is located in California. So go ahead, Joy.
Hi everyone, so my name is Joy and I'm a master's student at Academy of Art University studying web design and new media, and currently I'm also interning at DoorDash like Vicky, and I'll hand it off to Kari.
Hey everyone, I'm Kari. Oh, I'm hearing an echo. Let me give it 1 sec. Okay, cool. So I'm currently studying human-centered design and engineering at the University of Washington. I'm going to be a senior undergrad incoming in the fall, and I'm currently interning at Lyft as a product design intern on their product offerings team. So excited to talk to all of you today, and I'll pass it to Sanika.
Hello everyone, my name is Sanika Dulani and I'm a PhD student at University of Texas Arlington, and I'm interning at Salesforce. So please ask me any questions regarding anything because I have started as a beginner with no experience in the industry. So looking forward to this panel, and I'm passing the mic to Sudipti.
Hi everyone, I'm Sudipti. I'm a product design intern at Dropbox right now, and I'm also at the University of Washington in the Master's HCDE program. I'll pass off to Cole.
Hello everyone. My name is Cole. I go to school at RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology, and currently I'm at Intuit as a accessibility product designer.
Hey everyone, my name is Aditi and I'm a master's student at Indiana University studying HCID, and I'm a UX design intern at LinkedIn.
Hi everyone, my name is Rachel. I go to the California College of the Arts and I'm currently a product design intern in Microsoft.
Amazing. So I'm very happy to be here and speaking to all of you all. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedules, I'm sure. So we can go ahead and start talking about how this panel is going to work. Before we get started, I know that panels usually have a lot smaller amount of people talking. So the way that we organize this panel is we split up the topic of conversations into 4 different topics, and 2 people are kind of assigned essentially to answer. Nonetheless, if we have extra time, the panelists that feel inclined to speak are going to be able to have the raise hand feature, and also if we have time, we'll be able to cover what they need to say. So a little bit of a disclaimer, I'm just going to read this out so it's very clear. The interns will only be discussing their thoughts on remote internships and their personal journey on how they got into design. They won't be discussing or mentioning any of their projects that they're currently on, the company's projects, or any other material that's under NDA. And also watch out, after this Zoom panel is over, we're going to be sending out a feedback form from Superposition in which you can get the recording that's going to be on YouTube for you to access, as well as the LinkedIn links for the panelists. So you don't have to be scrambling to get them on LinkedIn right now. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and start talking about the first topic with Cole and Joy. So topic number 1 is about how you got interested in UX or product design. And I'm going to focus first on Cole. So Cole is currently an accessibility product design intern at Intuit, and he is the one person that is kind of specializing in accessibility design. So Cole, my first question to you is, what incited your interest in accessibility?
So as someone who is hard of hearing, it really, so I guess like especially like being hard of hearing, it kind of gave me a different way of how I could navigate just different stuff in the world. So for instance, since I'm hard of hearing, I find that a lot of products and just a lot of just it's something that people forget to apply into something, especially like YouTube videos, for example, of closed captioning. It never really was applied all the time into just, it's a very simple thing that people forget about, and it kind of affects me, and I don't want other people to experience that, the same thing that I experience.
No, absolutely. And I can imagine for someone that does need, different things in design to be accessible for them, why that would be such like a great driving point for you as a designer. So how did you, start stepping your foot into UX and product design, other than, of course, your personal experience in wanting and needing that accessibility? I'm curious to know like how you kind of first started.
Okay, so initially when I went into college, I was a psychology major, and my main reason why I went into psychology was to study how people benefit from using technology. And I guess like my favorite parts of psychology was, at least qualitative psychology, was talking to people and just really like testing it and seeing how everything connects together. And that's what I find to be a lot, like you apply a lot of that idea into the UX process and as well the accessibility process into
Right.
creating something.
Right. That's really interesting. And I'm sure within psychology as well, there's a lot of, problem solving involved and critical thinking. And some fun fact that you may have known by reading his bio is that he is a rock climber. And I was actually curious because I remember you were saying how sometimes you use the rock climbing analogy with this idea of UX problem solving. And I want you to tell me a little bit more about that.
Okay, so if you never rock climbed before, there's a start point and there's an end point.
Mm-hmm.
And your size, like your build, your hand size, there's so many factors that comes into solving a rock climb. So like, let's say you and we're climbing something, and I'm 5'11", I don't know how tall you are. So like a height difference could really change how you approach something. And I know like for me, I have smaller hands, so how I would hold a particular hold would really change on how I would approach it. Whereas for you, you approach it differently. And that's how I kind of connect like the idea of accessibility and inclusive design and UX design is how we're all trying to get to the same point, but we're all going there in a different way. And it's like there's no way that's worse than the other. They're all like the right way. So there's no competition between all. So that's how I connect the idea of rock climbing into all of it. It trains your problem solving ability, definitely.
Right.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. I just started bouldering myself like this summer, and it's definitely, as someone that's 5'4", I really do have to rely on my legs. So, but yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much for all of those really, really great answers. So that being said, I also wanted to talk to Joy because Joy, she is a current design intern at DoorDash, and she actually transitioned from sociology to design specifically. And I just wanted to say that she transitioned from studying sociology in her college year at UC Berkeley, but now is actually studying web new media at the Academy of Art University. Hey. And I'm just curious, tell me more, Joy, about how your sociology background, about that, and how it has affected your work in your UX design process, or as a UX designer in general.
So just to start off this, so I just wanted to kind of talk about how my design journey kind of led from sociology to the UX design. Absolutely. So I get this question a lot from people that like how to start UX design in the first place. So as a person who's from a non-design background, I also had a zero idea what UX design / product design was. So in the beginning, I did a lot of research, like just kind of Googling like what is UX design. And I read a lot of Medium articles written by people who talk about like the difference between UX/UI design and also like all sort of stuff, and watched a lot of like YouTube tutorials to like start off like kind of like channeling my skills on Figma and Sketch. So I would say that like there's no special recipe for like, you know, building your UX design skills. But for me, like in the beginning, I saw a lot of people's portfolio and kind of like looking into a really like a majority of different examples of like really good portfolio actually helped me to kind of start like how to build my own portfolio. So I think my answer to that is like, it's kind of important to kind of do your research first and then also gather a lot of online resources and like kind of get like start from that point on. And
yeah, absolutely.
Yes, and from your second question, which was like how my sociological background helped me to build and affected my product design skill, is that I feel like there were a lot of similarities between the sociological research and the way we approach the product design processes. So, for example, when I write like sociological thesis paper, you know, you set up a hypothesis and you kind of back up your thesis by like gathering survey data or like quotes from articles. And I feel like that was kind of very similar to how the product design process works. So like in the product design, you kind of define what the problem is, and then you provide your visual solutions by like backing up with user research data and also like doing validating your ideas through user testing. So I feel like there's the research data I've used for research method I use for sociology and the way I approach product design was quite like similar in terms of high level. So my point that I want to make is that like even if you feel like you're not from a design background, there's still a skills that you can kind of take away from your non-design backgrounds and kind of apply to that into your product design process.
Yeah, absolutely, Joy. No, yeah, that's awesome. I think that definitely as someone that technically is transitioning from graphic design, it can be really intimidating. And I get freaked out because there's so many talented people out there. But I think kind of distilling it into an idea that, you know, it's an accessible, I guess, like field to get into, and knowing that, you know, if you can connect sociology and you can connect rock climbing to UX design, you can pretty much connect anything that you want to connect to UX design. And I think that's something that's really enlightening and really, like, I guess as a student that's like scared about getting a job, really peaceful, like it makes me at peace. So that's awesome. Thank you so much for touching on all of that. That's awesome. So that is kind of like what the first topic about how you got interested. But now we're moving on to a second topic, and the second topic is the application experience. So we're kind of going on a gradual journey on this like internship experience. And for this topic, I'm specifically going to speak to Aditi and Sanika. So Aditi is currently a UX design intern at LinkedIn, and Sanika is currently a product design intern at Salesforce. So just like a little reminder for you all. Because this is kind of, for this topic, I'm kind of wanting it to be more of like a back and forth, so we don't have to like do everything Aditi and then everything Sanika. So my first question is, how did you prep for your application? Like for this, at least this specific application season, Aditi, you can go first and we can pass it on to Sanika. Like, how did you prep? Like, where do you begin, and what kind of tools did you use to kind of help you with this application?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing for me, like the biggest turning point and game changer for me, was the moment I started leveraging LinkedIn and like reaching out to people and getting feedback. And just like a little story on that. So I started applying maybe like early December. And you know, that first portfolio that we have, like we always think it's like the best thing and we're super proud of it. And so I guess I wasn't like expecting the amount of rejection that I would get right after applying. And I remember like it was just super disheartening and it was a rough time. Like I remember doubting myself. And I think at one point I was getting about 10 rejections a week, and it was bad. And I think at one point I just kind of like, well, something isn't working here. Like I can't just keep going on like this and getting rejected. And at that point I started reaching out to people. So I started reaching out to like my alumni and other designers on LinkedIn. And I was just like super honest with them. I was like, I am struggling, like I need some help. I would love your guidance and your feedback. And it was tough to hear what they said because, you know, your portfolio is like your baby, and a lot of them kind of like ripped it apart and like told me like, okay, you need to change this, you need to change this. But it was so needed. So I took all their feedback, took a little break from applying, and then started applying again in like January, and it was a lot more positive. And I think just the biggest like takeaway from that whole experience was like, you will get rejected. Like rejection is part of the game, but like the most important thing is like how you bounce back from that rejection and how you learn from it. Like don't just take rejection at face value, but really like try to understand there's probably a reason why you're getting like something isn't right here. So try to figure out like what isn't working and like how you can improve on that. And I think LinkedIn was like a really great resource for me to like, get that feedback and figure out how to like get over that.
Right. And speaking of LinkedIn, I remember when we figured out this whole panel was based off of connections on LinkedIn. And I remember Sonika and I specifically connected, and I knew that she had like a really great thing to say about networking in general. So Sonika, you can go ahead and tell us more about why you think it is so important, especially within the UX application process.
Definitely. So a little bit of background. I am not specifically from the UX. I did not study UX. I come from a computer science background. And a few years ago, I got this realization that I cannot be a coder for the rest of my life. I want to be creative. So that was the time when I made the switch from computer, like software engineering to UX design. And as Joy said, I learned everything online, from Medium, from YouTube, from reading blogs and other people's portfolio. And if you're a beginner, or if you're someone who's transitioning from other field to UX, trust me, it will be very, very overwhelming. So today I want to share with you some things that I did with myself that kept me sane throughout the process. So first of all, just imagine if you are getting into UX and if you want a job as a UX or product designer, it's like you are entering a game and you need to have some ground rules. First of all, if you get overwhelmed, have a backup strategy that you will again zone back and then just focus on what you want. Do you want an internship? That's it. That's your first goal. So in 2018, I had a portfolio. I was struggling. Like I was just looking at people's portfolio after portfolio, and then I just gave myself a deadline that this is my deadline. I'll create my portfolio by then. And I worked really hard and I did it. So that was the first thing. Getting things done is the first thing. Second, now that I have a portfolio with no experience and just my college degree, I started making a lot of connections, and LinkedIn is the best place to start. So here, have this rule of probability. The more you throw the die, the more the probability of getting a 6 increases. So that's the game for networking that I would suggest. Start reaching out to people, and there will be few nice people who will reply back to you as a beginner and will, give you the guiding support. And that's how, of 1 year of networking and 1 year of hard work. Okay, leaving no stones unturned is the third rule that I would say. That as a beginner, you just cannot have the leverage that it's okay. No, nothing is okay. You have to really, really work hard. And then, I got my first internship last year at Walt Disney, and that opened the door. So once you get your first job, I think the next job comes easily.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. I feel like it's really nice that you have this kind of methodical approach to kind of staying sane, which I feel like a lot of people need that, especially during this COVID season. So I really like this idea that you kind of said of like, just make a deadline and make yourself do it, and make yourself, like connect with other people on LinkedIn, even though you're scared, because, this person could potentially help you, like what Aditi was saying, like they will tear your portfolio apart, but like, you're going to get a job. Like you're going to, like, it's going to be a really good investment in the end. So I really think that you guys made really great points. And speaking of, so now we're going to start moving on to, once you do have your internship, and specifically for topic number 3, we're going to talk about our panelists' thoughts on remote design internships, as well as how to best present yourself. So we are going to be talking to Kari and Sudipti. And Kari, she's currently studying human-centered design and engineering at the University of Washington, and she's actually creating a more customized shared ride experience at Lyft. And Sudipti is a master's student in human-centered design and engineering program at University of Washington in Seattle. And she is very, sorry, give me one second. And Sudipti is actually coming from product design at Dropbox. So we're very happy that you guys are coming from like both a human-centered design background. So I'm gonna go ahead and start talking to you both about first kind of transitioning from LinkedIn and like, you know, wanting to connect with other people. So Deepti, I want you to talk a little bit more about how you should first present yourself, whether that is during your portfolio review or I don't know, like when you first introduce yourself on LinkedIn to somebody. Could you speak a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things I noticed, I've been talking to a lot of people about like doing mock reviews. So I've seen some presentations, and a big thing that people tend to do is like read off their resume. But like everyone has already gotten your resume. Like most people don't really care what your resume says. It's more about like what you're taking away from that. Like I had someone that I did a mock review with, and she went through like how she was an engineer and then wants to do UX design. And I was like, well, let's stop right there. Like, why actually did you want to get into UX? And then she had this really cool story about how she went to like, I think it was Disney World, where they have these immersive experience bracelets, and how she thought that was super cool. And that's how she got into like wanting to pursue entertainment industry roles like EA and stuff like that. And that's like totally what people want to hear, because there has to be like a good, like you have a reason. Everyone has a reason why they switched over, and like no one grew up thinking like this is what they're gonna do. So it's always really interesting to hear something more about who you are and like why this is even meaningful to you. So yeah, like totally be yourself. And especially like when it comes to portfolio reviews, I think it's really important to like emphasize what makes you unique. Like, I don't know if that's like so cliche to say out loud, but it totally matters. Like, think about the things that you're specifically interested in, because I always thought people didn't care, but like, I think people, that's what sets you apart.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And I feel like a lot of the time, you know, these things sound cheesy when we say it out loud, like be your unique self. But like in reality, some people just don't apply that. And I feel like, you know, with this like idea of having this elevator speech prepared and so on, like it's just really trying to see how you yourself can genuinely stand out, right? And I wonder, Kari, if you have like, you know, anything that kind of like made your story stand out, or like your kind of elevator speeches and how you kind of got to that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would echo everything that Sudipti said. I think those were really good points in general. And something to note too is that when you're going like into the interview process or early stage, like normally one of the first steps is a recruiter will reach out based on your application and you'll do a phone screen. And so that's going to be a lot of basic questions. And that's where you really have to focus on how you're presenting yourself, how you're telling your story. And some of the things that I already kind of knew were going to come up were specific to like what do you want to get out of this internship? Where do you want to go in product design or UX design? So it's important for you beforehand, even before you get to that stage or before you go into a call like that, to know, to like have thought about it, and not just as in, like it has to be more nuanced than just like I want to get a UX design internship. Of course you do. But think about like what you want to do, again, going back to like why you got interested in the field and what types of things you would be passionate to work on. It's important to have that kind of come through within the projects that you've worked on and the projects that you're going to talk about as well. So for me, and it doesn't even have to be like super, super specific. Like for me, a way that I normally present myself is just that I'm really passionate about designs that make an impact on people and their communities, and the way that people fit in and interact with others and relate to other people. And then how tech and products can fit into that and empower them through that.
Right.
So again, that's something that can be applied to so many different areas and so many different projects. But with that, that's kind of something that I use as an elevator pitch, something that I'm specifically interested within design.
Right.
And then I can tie that to projects that I've worked in the past, not even necessarily at an internship, but something like one of the projects on my portfolio is something that I did for class where we focused on the user group of farmers markets and how to improve the experience for shoppers and help them to connect more to vendors. And so that's an example of this like very interesting community where people come and it's local farmers, they're buying local produce, and it's a very personalized experience where people are engaging with others.
Yeah.
So I can kind of tie into that and how that was a really cool experience to get to talk to the farmers market vendors and the shoppers and how they connect with each other. And then having those interviews and being able to talk to them and then fit those insights into the project that I was working on. So that's kind of an example, and you can weave that throughout as you're presenting the projects and what you've worked on, kind of weaving that initial thing that you're really passionate about throughout your descriptions of those experiences, and then tying it into, like, for example, I would say, like, I really want to work at Lyft because it's a way to improve transportation, and it's critical to center cities around people rather than cars, which is kind of one of their taglines that they talk about a lot. So that's, again, kind of fitting into that aspect of community and empowering people to connect with others, to go be with their families or to travel and get to work, and things like that. So it's something to kind of tie everything together. And, you know, we always talk about storytelling in design too. That's like a big buzzword, and it's kind of like, what does that mean though? Part of that can be, it's so vague and nebulous, but I think part of that can be, again, framing it, having these themes kind of that weave throughout your story and through what you've done in the past, where you're coming from, what you've been working on currently, and then where you want to go in the future. So making sure there's kind of some thread that's going to tie all of that together.
Yeah, I think this is really interesting, like an interesting thing to think about too, because it's like, once you do have your story, it's like, it sounds like to me, like you can, like, it's almost like you're making a design system for your own story, and you're able to have a flexible design system that can, like, you know, if whether it's a job interview or a project, you're able to kind of just apply that storytelling to each thing. And I think that's what really makes you kind of differentiate yourself. Like, you know, when I see all these portfolios, like, it's not just about, like, yes, you did research, cool, like, yes, you made wireframes, cool, but it's almost just like, how do you personally, like, shine through in your projects? And I really love that idea of kind of like having this theme kind of go on. So that's really awesome. So I wanted to specifically talk about too, you know, you're in a remote design internship, and I kind of wanted to ask, like, how does it feel? Like, have you had, you know, internships before? And if, how does that compare to kind of your experience right now? Yeah, you can go ahead, Sudipti.
I think it's a little tricky because, like, obviously it sucks compared to, like, walking up to someone and hanging out with them. So,
Right.
like, at the same time, like, I'm so grateful that I was even able to do this summer.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what helped me the most was to be, like, I don't know, I have, like, a knack for oversharing, which helped me a lot. Because every time I have, like, a sit down with my mentor, I'd be like, yeah, so I'm, like, a little worried about this deadline, but I think this ties back to, like, my childhood, and, like, I don't know why I got in these weird conversations about, like, how I'm afraid of, like, I'm, like, overcommitting to deadlines that I maybe couldn't meet. So I think things like that, like, those feelings come up, and when you're in person, people can kind of sense that you're stressed, or they can see you, like, sitting at your desk for a long time, or staying. But when you're remote, they don't see that. So, like, being very upfront about, like, this is generally how I feel here, and, like, this is how it's going, and I need advice on how to move forward. I think that's the best way to navigate that, or that I found so far. Just so what, like, those things, people, like, if they don't see you doing those things, they don't hear about it, it's hard for them to guide you through that.
Right. It sounds like to me, like, communication is, like, way more important, like, or not way more important, but more important now, because, like, you literally, like, this is all just, like, it would be cool if we were all in a room, but sadly we're not, you know? So, Kari, I was wondering, like, how did you think this experience was, like, going to be different, even though you knew it was going to be remote? Like, how is it a little bit different than you expected?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was actually pleasantly surprised by how smoothly everything went. Shout out to Lyft, they did a really good job with onboarding, like, everything was very structured, and so I feel like I got ramped up pretty well. But I think we're lucky that we're in this, like, modern age where we have all these awesome tools to use. Like, for example, we use Figma, and so that's this collaborative design tool, kind of like Google Docs, where you can send a link to someone and actually see them, like, in their cursor moving around on your screen. So that's really cool, just the feeling of, like, even though we're all separate and in different places, it kind of feels like you're actually working together, and you can actually, there's that kind of visibility where they're on your document, they're looking through it with you. So that's been helpful to, like, actually feel more together with people. I think one, like, advantage that I didn't realize as well was we have, like, offices in New York City, Seattle, and so basically West Coast and East Coast. And one cool thing is that because everything is virtual, it's a lot easier for me to say, like, to reach out to a product designer who's based in New York City and schedule a call with them to talk about their work. And normally I feel like that might feel a little bit more awkward because I'd want to be like meeting with people in the office in San Francisco,
Right.
And doing more sit-down meetings with people. But because we all are like virtual anyways, there's no difference between really me setting up a meeting with someone on my team versus someone that's based in New York City. I just have to do it a little bit earlier in the day.
Right.
So it's been nice to be able to take advantage of that too. And I would just urge everyone in this time, like that's something that can be applied more generally too. Like video conferencing is breaking down the barriers of geography.
Right.
You can connect with people all across the world. Like some of you guys are coming from other countries, which is awesome too.
Yeah.
So it's breaking down the space that way, and there's a lot of advantages to that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I feel like, sorry, continue, Sadipti. I didn't mean to interrupt.
That's okay. I think we both interrupt each other. But yeah, I was just gonna say remote is like the great equalizer. Like no one, like what's been really cool is we have like an intern community at Dropbox, and like the people that you end up talking to and like hanging out with, like it's not so much like, I don't know about you guys, but when I go anywhere in an environment I don't know, I like gravitate towards like the design people or like people that look like me or talk like me, you know what I mean? Like you just sense that. But like with remote, it's so easy to just like approach someone. You can literally just like steal time on their calendar and like set that time aside. So yeah.
No, I definitely do think like I would say that I've never been as immersed in the design community than during this COVID season. So I guess like there's definitely a lot of pros and a lot of cons, obviously, but hopefully, you know, like especially with this this panel, like being an example of how, you know, we can still get through this and get through this together is awesome. And I think you guys made really great points about how being remote connects people more than we thought. So that's awesome. Now we're going to go to topic 4, which is how to be successful at a remote design internship. So in this topic, we're going to talk to Vicky and Rachel. And as we know, Vicky is at DoorDash and Rachel is from CCA, and she is currently in Microsoft. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is.
Awesome. Okay, great. So I'm very excited to be talking to you about this because obviously, you know, I am looking forward to one day, you know, getting an internship, and I am curious, Rachel, you can go first, about, you know, what are your tips? What are your, like, I don't know, words of wisdom we can say about how you can succeed in like this experience or any other job experience?
Yeah, I kind of prepared some tips for staying productive even when you're in a remote setting, and especially when it comes to like design and research deliverables. It seems like a really weird structure when you can't really see your teammates. So I do have some feedback on that. Some of the things I tried and failed really badly, and some things went a lot better. But the first one is definitely when it comes to design deliverables, I would recommend learning the design system of where you're working at. So I think whether it's a larger company like Microsoft or a smaller one, you'd be able to learn what exact components they're using or what tools they're using, and just it will help you save a lot of time when you can reuse already what is made instead of reinventing the wheel. So I think that is definitely a great thing to save time on, and also to scope things out and know what's the highest priority for you to work on. In terms of getting quick iterations for research, I would recommend filming like 2-minute videos of what you're working on and just sending it to people all over your company to get really quick feedback, just so that people can really get back to you even when they're for their own convenience without having to bring them into a meeting. I would also recommend getting help from any UX researchers within your company if you can, and really start research from day one so you don't have to change like key foundations of your design later on. So those are just a couple things that I tried out, but I would definitely say like it depends on what works for you. Yeah.
That's awesome. And I'm assuming too, like when, like, I'm just curious now as well, when you're talking about this like design system, specifically at Microsoft, like a larger corporate company, like was there like a process of you kind of like almost studying brand guidelines? Because I'm coming from a graphic design background, and I'm just curious to know kind of how you were immersed into that brand.
Yeah, that's a really great question, Julia. I think in terms of Microsoft, my personal experience is that people forget that you have to learn the design system, and some of it is so immense that it's not really like, oh, how are you designing the screen? But it's more like for every single product in this whole ecosystem, there's a different way of designing it. And for me, I'm actually working on 2 products and 2 very different design systems. So there was a huge investment of time for myself to learn how it was being done and also picking up new tools here and there. So yeah, I would definitely say that there was a lot of time spent learning.
Well, that's great. That's awesome. Well, thank you for that. And I'm glad to know that you're like succeeding in your internship at Microsoft.
I hope.
I think you are.
I don't know.
I think you're doing a great job. I mean, I don't know what you're doing, but NDAs. So moving on, we're going to go and move on to Vicky. And Vicky, you're currently at DoorDash, and I'm just really curious about what are things that you do on a daily basis that kind of help contribute to a successful design internship for you? Like, what does that look like for you?
So like in the remote like context, you know, like you're not like really like in the office. So like most of the time, like your managers or your mentors don't really know what you're like up to, like what you're like currently like at the moment working on. Like they know your project, but like maybe like you don't like, they don't really like see it on your screen or things like that. So for me, like one of the things that I do like every day, like every morning before I start my work day is to, you know, Slack them, telling them like, oh, today I plan to do this and that. And my goal is, you know, to have this finished and, you know, send this out to, you know, other teams to review. So like having, you know, that, you know, over communicating with your managers and your mentors and always update them. I think that's like one of the skill that I would recommend, like, you know, anyone to, you know, to kind of get like used to it. Because like, again, like, you know what you're doing, but then your mentors who's like sitting like, you know, far away from you don't really know what you're up to. Right. And they really like that you are over communicating and then always like ask questions, even though like, you know, if it's a dumb question for you, is actually like show them that you care and it's actually like help them to understand you like a lot more, and it's gonna like contribute to, you know, helping your internship and your project, you know, very successful.
Yeah, no, I think that that's so important because that kind of ties in to what Rachel was saying about like how, you know, you should be sending people like your progress, you should be over communicating and also connecting with this, like you already have this opportunity, you might as well not be shy, right? And like, you know, make the most out of the connections that you're talking about. So that is really great advice. And I think the next question that I have for you is, do you have any tips on how to be successful for a design internship, but not for like, you know, currently, but like for the future, for the post-COVID world of interns? I'm curious what your guys' advice would be.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
All right. Go ahead.
No worries. Yeah. So at least for me, I feel like you know, with the current pandemic, the system of how internships are being acquired or how they're being run will be really different. I don't even know for sure how things are going to be next year. But I definitely think that if you're not currently interning, you should definitely try volunteering and looking and creating opportunities if you're able to. I know that like openings are hard to come by, and even when they are, I've received so many rejections in my life. Like honestly, I can't even keep track of how many there are. But since we're currently in a pandemic, I would definitely look around your community to see if there's any need for you to contribute your skills back. And in the process, learning from people. I personally volunteer for a homelessness nonprofit. And in that process, really got to know a lot of people, building my network, but also growing better as a designer. Another quick tip that I have is to learn the time zones of the people that you work with, because there are people working in different time zones. Like even if it's on the East Coast, like it's 3 hours after. So right. Because I'm on the West Coast. So like it's really great just in case you don't want to schedule a meeting for 9 p.m. for them, and it's just a nice way to be more considerate. Also learning about the culture and the way that people are communicating and trying to get everyone together as possible, especially when it comes to your intern class or between yourself and your teammates. Yeah, just getting to know everyone. I think to me that are my tips.
That's awesome. And Vicky, I know you had something to say.
Oh yeah, so I think like my tips is pretty much aligned with what Rachel was saying. I do have like 2 extra tips that, you know, I would like to give out to, you know, like current intern or like future like design intern, is that like when you're at the company, if you know, if it's like remote or not, I would, you know, kind of like try to take advantage of, you know, your internship. Like, don't think about that, you know, you're going to an internship just to work from like 9 to 5. Use that advantage to connect with other people outside of your design team as well. So like if you're working in like a team of like 30 designers, don't just connect with those designers, but also like reach out to like the researcher teams, reach out to like contents team, and like even like engineers or like DevOps or, you know, operational teams to, you know, make connection with those people. And also like, you know, a lot of people think like, oh, you know, recruiters are someone who, you know, we just talk to like at the beginning, but actually that's not true. Just like try to, you know, stay connected with your recruiters, schedule one-on-one with, you know, with people you think is interesting, because that connection is going to help you a lot more after the internship.
That's really great advice. I feel like we can underestimate. I mean, until LinkedIn came into my life, like I definitely underestimated this whole like, oh yeah, social networking is good for you. But in reality it is. And I feel like we really do need to listen to that, and like not only listen, but, you know, take actions towards that. So I couldn't agree with you all more in the things that you said. So that's awesome. Well, that actually wraps up the topic questions that I had, which I created for myself and for everyone else in this panel. But we're actually going to be opening the floor for Q&As from you guys on the chat. So just a little thing on how this is going to work as well, since, you know, we have to do this virtual thing. The panelists are going to be able to raise their hand if they would like to answer a question. And then we're going to hopefully have every panelist like speak to whatever question speaks to them. And we're just going to make sure we just time this nicely and make sure that we do this on time. So go ahead and send your questions to the chat. Just an FAQ question. Will this be posted anywhere? Yes, it will be posted on YouTube. And that link is going to be sent from Superposition Stephanie, and that's going to be there for you, as well as everybody's LinkedIn. So you don't have to be scrambling right now on LinkedIn. Thanks, guys. Okay. Okay, so we have one question is, do you need to know code in order to do UI and UX? Which is a great question if I didn't know. But does anybody want to like kind of maybe Sonika, like since you specifically are coming from a engineering background, like what is the answer to that?
It's your choice. So in UX design, there are different things. It's a big range. UX design, there can be visual design or graphic design, and there's a UX engineer. So UX engineer role needs coding because you do some kind of front end job, but it's up to you. So if you come from a computer science background and you want to code, you can definitely take on that job. But I was very clear that I don't want to do any coding. So that's how I'm doing my UX design internship right now.
That's good. Okay. That's really good to know, because I feel like the range is something that not a lot of people know. And Cole, your hand is raised. So would you like to say anything about that?
Yeah, sure. So I definitely feel like it also depends where you work at. I know like some agencies will also like prefer someone who knows coding, for example. Like if you go to like a corporate, they tend to have engineers and designers separate, and they kind of work specifically on design. But also it depends on where you're in. So like if you're interested in accessibility, as like I'm interested in accessibility, knowing some form of code on how to fix something and send it to the engineer would also be beneficial. So it's mostly like understanding the code more so than actually applying and sitting on there coding yourself.
Right. Well, that's awesome. Okay, I have this other question that I think is really interesting as well. So what do you guys feel is a common mistake that you see in different design portfolios, specifically UX and product portfolios? And anyway, yes, Vicky, go. It's like first come, first serve.
So, I would like to answer this question because I actually like spend my whole summer like helping people.
That's how we met.
Yeah, that's how we met actually. Like I had a post on LinkedIn that I would like to help, 200 students to like go through their portfolio. And I think like one of the common mistake that I see on most portfolio is the lack of like personalized story, like personal story. So like if you think about it, your portfolio like is like a place that you're showing your work and your your UX skills, but then like you have to think about like companies really care about your personal stories and your personal journeys as well, and like why you different and why you're special. So like do not forget the personal stories and your PR yourself part, and don't just show your work, also show your personalities as well.
Yeah, and I think that's really good advice. And learning from what we did here today in the panel, I think having that story, that theme, like Kari was saying, as well as what Sudipti said about how being able to present yourself, I think is just definitely a really nice kind of transition into that. So Joy, what did you have to say with that question of what's a common mistake?
So adding on to what Vicky said, I noticed that there's a lot of portfolio / case studies with the same like design processes. For instance, like every project start with like user research and then goes persona and then like wireframing and like etc. I feel like it's very like common template, I guess. But I feel like, when it comes to product design, how you approach problem is very different based on which problem you were trying to solve. So I feel like instead of just going through that template, try to kind of like create your own case study that focuses on the problem and like trying to solve that problems. So I'm not sure if that makes sense, but like.
No, it definitely does. I have heard stories about like people like almost like copying verbatim, things that people already have. And that's like kind of scary. And I think that, that goes to show that differentiating yourself is to your advantage, like you're going to want to stand out and not just fit in with everybody else. Yeah, so that's awesome. Thank you. And Aditi, what do you have to say?
Yeah, so I just want to like follow up on what Joy said. I think a lot of people follow this sort of like template thing, and it's okay to like have a lot of the same stuff, but you have to be able to show like why that was important, like why you did what you did. So if you're going to put a persona in there, like say what you learned from it. If you're going to put research in there, say what you learned from it. Don't just put research, persona, user story, and kind of like see it as a template. Like it has to be super obvious how this helped your case study.
Right. Definitely. I think that also goes and pairs like really nicely with the idea of storytelling. Like you don't want to give someone like a textbook of information. Like you actually want it to be entertaining and something readable, right? So that's awesome. Okay, sounds good. So I have, going off of portfolios, I have this question that says, I was wondering what exactly a portfolio should consist of. Does it have to have case studies that you do for specific businesses or organizations? And Rachel, you can go ahead. I think you're muted. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm on mute. Yeah. Otherwise, I might have offered to answer the question a little bit too early. But I think when it comes to like the different types of projects, this is something that I've really been talking to different people in the industry and hearing more feedback on. I think it's definitely valuable to show a couple of more conventional projects that really exhibit your skills and how they can be used in a more like internship setting, so they know that you can do the work if they're hiring you. But I would definitely recommend adding 1 or 2 other works that also showcase your other interests. Some of them are more related to design and some of them are not really. But let's say if you worked on like a physical kind of design form, like maybe we design like transportation system that isn't really related to maybe like mobile or web design. I think it's still interesting to show that, so it gives a little bit more personality and helps people remember it. Because the truth is that I think even though we're working on mobile and web, there's just so many similar projects that are floating around that it's hard to differentiate yourself. This really goes back to what Vicky was talking about earlier as well.
Well, that's awesome. I think that's really, really helpful. I think range does show a lot, and I think that you definitely covered that very beautifully. So Sudipti, what do you have to say with that question?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on, I saw another question that was asking like, what if you don't have a lot? I think that was what they were asking. And I would feel empowered to just have one project in your portfolio. I literally started applying for jobs with one project in mind. It was just my fall quarter project, and it was a good like start to finish kind of design process. And I worked in a group on it, and that's literally all I had to start with. And then as I was doing job applications, I had like a couple of design challenges that came with the job application. So I added those as I was going along, but I would totally not feel bad about having like just one project. And if it has to be just one, try to get like, I don't know, try to explore something that you're interested in, like something that you can speak to in both ways. And don't feel like it has to be an app. It can totally be like anything. Like UX is everywhere, and we don't, I think, always realize that.
That's a really good answer. I feel like I always like can imagine how people would think that, you know, you need to have a mobile app, you know, and I think that, you know, it's another great reminder about how we can use whatever we find interesting and like apply it to our portfolios. And I think there's also one thing to say about like designing your own projects and not necessarily having some kind of, you know, prompt that a company gives you, because you can make your own prompts, right? So another question that I have is, how did you develop design confidence? And that's like a really interesting question, because it's just like hits home, right? So I'm wondering if anybody has anything to say about that. Kari, go ahead.
Okay, this is hard because I don't feel super confident in my design ability or my designs. But I think one thing that can be really helpful is trying to talk to people that are in the industry, or making connections with even other people that are interested in design, and showing your work to people. Like that's so important to actually, and I think in general, like it's a big conversation about like keeping your work hidden while it's in like the exploratory stages versus showing it to people when it's maybe more unfinished.
Right.
That's something that I found like even anxiety with at my stage at my internship, because I can see people on my Google Docs or hovering on my Figma files, and I'm like, I don't want them to look at this yet. But I think getting over that is really important, like showing people things mid-stage, even if you're not feeling fully confident in where it's at, or it doesn't visually look amazing. I think that can be really helpful to kind of get over that hump of like, it always needs to look super polished. Obviously there's different stages, like if you're presenting something at more of a final stage, that needs to be more cleaned up. But I think reaching out for feedback earlier on, and getting critiques, and just being more confident to share your work, even if you don't feel like it's at that super high fidelity yet, can be awesome to kind of get over that fear of having people judge you, and then also just being able to be confident in putting that work out and getting critique on it, and then being able to iterate on it earlier on when it's less polished too. There's maybe more room to make bigger changes or keep iterating on it. So show work early and reach out to people to get feedback on your work.
That's awesome. Okay, I think Sonika, you were going to say something, right?
Yeah, so building on what Kari said, I think always have this mindset, disconnect yourself with your design. So if someone criticizes your design, don't take it personally. You are not at fault. Everyone is trying to make that design perfect, and everyone has that goal that your work needs to be perfect, and that's it. So it's always good to have that disconnect between you and your design. So don't take anything personally.
Absolutely. I feel like art in general is so, you know, like you need to be able to like detach yourself, because I feel like art is a very personal thing. And of course, design is somewhat different, but still it's coming from the heart, right? Aditi, what do you have to say about that?
I think it's also good to just put yourself out there and like try new things. And I think school is like a really, really great place to do this. For example, if you are better at like graphic design, but you want to improve, I don't know, like your storytelling skills, like you should be the one to like lead meetings, or you should be the one to pitch projects. And likewise, like if you want to take on graphic design skills and learn that, like you should be the one to do that. You really have to like put yourself out there and like try new things. Otherwise you're not gonna experience what it's like, and you're not gonna like learn from it.
Oh, absolutely. I feel like this goes with kind of the idea of just put yourself out there. Like what Sonika was saying was just like, you have to be able to let yourself go and let yourself go do those things and make those opportunities for yourself. So that's awesome. So speaking of schools, it says, one of the questions say, how important is it to have a BA or an MA in this field in order to get an actual job in product design? So Rachel, you can go ahead and answer that.
Yeah, awesome. I think I come from a pretty unique background where I went to both a UX bootcamp and also to like a 4-year course. But I'm still currently in a 4-year course, like I'm rising senior. I think there was a huge difference in how it was, but I definitely understand that, not everyone has the opportunity to have a longer UX course, and it's still a really relatively new field that a lot of people are only recently discovering. But I definitely think that one thing good about having a longer course is having a stronger foundation. I think in the shorter UX bootcamp, we happen to learn a lot about how to use the tools and how do you apply them for real world corporate projects. But I think when it comes to school, you get to be a little bit more open and really hone in on your creativity. So I think that's like a difference, but I wouldn't really say that it's like we have to get a BA or MA to do UX design. I think one thing great about UX design is that it's really accessible to people, but just being accessible to people doesn't mean that there isn't skill involved. There actually is a lot of practice and skill involved, and I think I'm still getting there. I definitely think that like if your only option is to get like a shorter course or like a boot camp, just keep your mind open and keep growing. I know of a really cringy story. I would brand myself as like a UX designer, like just when I was interested in it a little bit, and I didn't really know the full scope of what I didn't know yet. I think since then it's just been a lot better for me to keep my mind open and keep learning.
That's awesome. That's really good to know. And Joy, what do you have to say?
Yeah, so I think I kind of talked about that in my like previous questions. So for the answer, do you really need a BA or MA degree on design if you want to do UX design? It's no, because I asked this question a lot to my like senior designers in DoorDash, and they said, actually having a different background really is valuable when it comes to UX design, because there are different ways to solve the problem. And not only with the skills in visual design, but there's like different method or different learnings that you could like take away from even from your life or daily life. So I feel like for that, you don't really need a degree. But I feel like, in order to kind of elevate the skill for visual design, you still need practice. So I would just encourage people to actually look at like all the other great resources out there, because there are other because UX design resources are like everywhere online. So I would just like encourage people to like practice and like look at other people's examples.
Right. And I think that kind of blends with this other question that I saw, which is how can you learn UX and UI design by yourself? And I think that we briefly kind of like touched during the conversation, Medium articles, YouTube videos, learning from different portfolios. But I'm curious to know if anybody else has like any other things that they've been doing or they have done to help them learn more about UX and UI. Yes, Vicky.
Yeah. So like for me, I came from like a graphic design background. Like, when I was young, I always think like, oh, I'm gonna, become a graphic designer. And then I found out about like UX and product design, at my last year of high school. So like with my, background, being very creative, I know that I'm lack of like the psychology, the sociology, and the human, computer interaction side of it. So what I do is that, continue practice my, the creative, the design side, but then I also, sign myself up to like courses about like, psychology, behavioral science, and, like even like marketing and entrepreneurship to understand, how, to build a digital product. And those skills, is really, really helpful. So it's like, I think it's really depends on, what kind of background you're coming from, and you kind of know like your weakness and your strength. And, that will kind of lead you to, oh, if I'm, weak at like psychology, maybe that's something I should look into. So I think like that is a really good skill, because then you kind of pick up, a lot of background altogether, and it's helped you to build a great product.
Yeah, I think definitely UX it's so interdisciplinary. And it's like wild how much like someone can't be just like an all around like 100% the best UX designer, because that's not true. And that there would have to be like, I don't know, an expert at everything basically, because I feel like there's so much overlap. So that's really great. The point of like being able to know your weaknesses, like your pain points as your own persona, like what can you do to kind of soothe those pain points? And Deepti, what do you have to say with that?
I was just going to mention something. I think it's kind of already been said, but as many new opinions or like perspectives you can expose yourself to, I think that's where I learned the most. I don't really have like so much discipline for online courses, but if you don't have that, like reach out to people and just see if you can like chat with them, get their perspective on the work that you've done, and don't be afraid to ask people for mentorship. Like someone, I think Rachel mentioned that also in the comments, but like you can literally just reach out to people and ask them if they have time to like maybe ask them for like a 1 hour a month commitment or something. Like
Right.
ask if you can check in with them. I think people are a lot more helpful than you might expect.
Absolutely. And I think there's this like new like world of like wanting to help each other, and like designers, I was so scared at first, but knowing that, you know, I could reach out to Vicky, I could reach out to like any of you guys and know that at the end of the day, good designers want good designers to succeed. And I feel like that's a really kind of really nice way to think about it instead of being so intimidated all the time. And Sonika, you had something to say.
I just want to add that just be a big fan of learning. Even after my portfolio was made and I learned everything, I didn't stop learning. And I started learning from different domains. So have you heard of masterclass.com? So they have all these big people teaching their
really good ads. They get me every time.
So I started learning from interior designing, fashion designing, like any other domain that would help me learn how to become a better designer from different perspective. So it's okay that you come from any field, but keep your learning or minds open to keep learning from different fields. That will make you a very powerful designer. Right.
No, that's definitely an awesome point. Also, I love all their advertisements. Okay. So another question that's kind of an interesting question actually is, do you consider UX and UI to be more technical or to be more artistic? Yes, Sudeepti.
I just want to say that I don't think it's like you don't have to have an art background to be a UX designer. I think the beauty of UX design is that like anybody can be a designer, especially when you're doing your work and you're looking for feedback and like asking people what they think. Don't just ask designers, because those are not always like the audience that you're like directing your work towards. Like anybody can give you good feedback, because just human eyes are honestly like really helpful to see. So yeah, I would not feel bad about like not feeling good about having done art in your life. Like even sketching, like don't feel afraid to sketch. Everyone started in a place where their sketches were shitty. Like it just happens.
Yeah,
so,
I remember too, like I see like lots of portfolios and like the lo-fi wireframes are not like they're not like the Mona Lisa, and that's okay.
Yeah.
So that's really good. That's a really great point.
Yeah.
Awesome. Kari, what do you have to say?
Yeah, it was just interesting too, because I saw another question about like, do you have to be good at art to do UX?
Right.
And I would just say totally not. I think it's a common like misconception, especially because design is in the name, that you have to be really artistic to get into it.
Right.
And there's a certain amount of creativity involved, like for sure. But creativity can take different forms. Creativity doesn't mean that you can sketch a picture of a face and it's going to look beautiful for your storyboards or something.
Right.
It's like people can use creativity in so many different ways, and it's more creativity in terms of problem solving. So yes, there is some level of visual design that you need to be decent at, and it really helps in terms of like even like building out a deck, but it's more in terms of how you can communicate things well. Like your sketches could not look great. It could just be stick figures. That's fine, as long as people can convey like can look at that and figure out like what scenario you're trying to convey through that. Or that your wireframes, they don't have to look nice, but as long as they're clean and they can show, you can see like what the interaction flow would be like. It's more about communication versus making it look beautiful. And I've even heard people talk about how with portfolios, like you even want to stay away from making things too trendy or like having too many animations or like focusing too much on the visuals. Cause that's like, yes, at the end of the day, we're people and it is helpful to, and it does draw your eye to see something that's visually appealing, but you don't want to detract too much from what the core of your work actually is. Like if I had to say one thing, I would say it's more technical. With visual design can definitely enhance it, and it is important on some level, but at the root, it's more of your problem solving ability.
Right. And Rachel, what do you have to say?
Yeah, I wanted to add on like a really quick point. I think sketchnoting is actually a very important skill that I think I had the privilege of learning at CCA. I would definitely recommend that, you know, at any point in your UX design career, to learn how to draw really quick storyboards will help to convey the essence and the value that your product is giving to people. So it doesn't really require any like specific art background, but it does have like some visual elements, like how do you draw a hand really quickly, or how do you draw this really quickly, and how do you draw a phone like yourself holding a phone. So it's just,
Right.
you know, all these really quick things that it would be really great to draw when it comes to aligning with your stakeholders and what the vision of your product could be like.
Right. That's awesome. And Cole, what do you have to say?
So the way I think about it is that like UX and UI is definitely more of a technical thing, because UX itself is more of a process on how you do something, and everyone is good at one part or at least two parts of part of a UX process. So like I feel it's definitely as like what Carl was saying, you bring up a lot of points of communication, and like it's just I definitely think you don't need to be an artist, but an artist tends to draw and do things for themselves and how they interpret something. Whereas like when you're a designer, and that's what I think.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a really great point. I think just like a little tangent is that my design teacher was like, what's the difference of fine art and design? And like, everyone's like all silent. And I think you guys bring the really great point about like design is about critical thinking and problem solving and communication. Sure, you can critically think when you look at the Mona Lisa, but like if you're a designer, like, and making an app about Mona Lisa, you have to think more critically about the technical aspects of those things. So that's really, really great feedback, you guys. So it's interesting because there's a question that I saw, which is how can someone who isn't typically creative, so creativity it's not necessarily equivalent to being artistic, but how can someone who isn't typically creative get better at UX design? I think that's a really interesting question. Yes, Sudipti.
I think what bugs me about education, like especially in my program right now, is they don't really teach you things like design thinking. Like it helps just to have that term because you can Google it and like find things on this, but it's basically like what like maybe Aditi and I learned in architecture school, because you need to, I think, practice more of that like idea generation phase, like being able to create and like not like we're naturally like very hesitant, I think, to come up with ideas because we might already judge ourselves in our head and say they're stupid before we write them down. So I would say literally just like practice brainstorming ideas and like pushing yourself to brainstorm. Like I think there's like strategies for this, like where you can do like 5 different ideas and then like ask like how you can challenge those even further.
Right.
You know, like I'm very awfully misquoting the strategy, but there's like exercises for it. So next project you do, like practice brainstorming as many ideas as you can come with.
Right.
Oh wait, this is what we did in class. Actually, we did this thing where it's like come up with 60 sketches for like this prompt, and it was so ridiculous because it's like, well, I have like 10 ideas, and so try that. Like try to push yourself to come up with as many ideas as you can.
Right. And I think there's definitely something to say about there's the reason why design exercises do exist, and they're exercises for a reason. Because, you know, like for this specific person that's talking about, you know, how if I'm not as creative, I think like it's really interesting to think of it as a muscle that you're building with these exercises. So that's a really great point that you make, Sudipti. Cole, what do you have to say?
So I'm definitely one of the people that like I get kind of bored just sitting on there brainstorming over and over and over of an idea, and like so I feel like what I do to just become, because I think UX is mostly critical thinking, right? So I think like there's different ways to actually developing the way you think, like philosophy, like you're trained to think philosophically. So for how I went about learning how to critically think and break things apart is through like rock climbing, for example, and like bouldering. So like if you have to get from one part to another part, it's not just one move. You have to break it apart and how you look at it. So one move to one part, you have to move your hands like this way, you have to break it apart. And like it kind of helps you train your thought and how to think and how to become more creative, because you're eventually creating something from based off what you're thinking.
Right. Well, that's great. And Aditi, what do you have to say with that as well?
I just want to echo what Siddipti said about brainstorming. So a really fun exercise that we did in class, our professor asked us to do like what if scenarios. So like, what if this product collaborated with like Lady Gaga or Disney? And it was a really great way to just like think out of the box, because I think a struggle that we always come by is like, we're so constrained by like all the business constraints and the like feasibility and all that stuff, and we are unable to like think creatively and like really think out of the box. So, like, just ask yourself, like, what if we collaborated with this person, what if with that person? I think you'd be surprised by the crazy ideas you come up with. And once you come up with all these ideas, and then you can like rein it in, but don't restrict yourself in that like beginning stage.
Right. No, absolutely. I feel like that's a really great point. And I think, like there has to be like a resource with all of these like brainstorming exercises, as well as just like the idea of having this exercise of like like pairing two completely different things. I think Aditi, I think like just challenging ourselves to like think out of the box is awesome. And Vicky, what do you have to say?
So I just want to add on onto, all the ideas and all the thought of other panelists. Like one of the exercise that I usually do, just like, like just on like a daily basis, on just like a random moment, is that I always like trying to look for products and kind of like play around with it, and always ask the questions like why are they doing it this way? Why did they, put this button here? Why did they, like do this and that? And that kind of like, make you realize a lot of things. And it's actually like really helpful when you do the next like brainstorming sessions, because you kind of like spot like all these smaller things from other products. So like for example, like if the next time you buy something on Amazon, kind of like notice how they do things. Like why do you like always come back to Amazon and purchase things? Like why is the user experience like so great here? Kind of like always ask that questions and kind of like analyze what you're seeing. And I think like that is a skill that as you're doing it a lot, then when you're doing your own product, is going to be very helpful.
Right. I think also like that's a really great point that you make, because it's like you slowly, from what I'm hearing you say, it's like you slowly know what's good, or you learn what's good from the stuff around you, and you also learn what's bad. And I think it's like really cool to be like, oh, I know that's a badly like made app because this and this and this, which goes back to your questions of why. So that's awesome. And Kari, what do you have to say?
Yeah, Vicky's point just made me remember something that could be helpful for like practicing product thinking in general too, which is a lot of companies incorporate into their like interview process something called a design critique or product critique. And so practicing that this past recruiting season was actually really helpful for me. There's examples, I can try to link a Medium article in the chat too, but there's good examples of how to like go about this. And basically they'll have you pick an app or present like an app or a web application, and you share your screen and you talk through, they ask you like, why do you think, like at a top level first, you practice looking at the different elements of the screen, like why is it laid out this way? Thinking about the product itself, like one example is like Venmo. So like what is Venmo trying to do? Like what's their core value proposition? How do they make their money? Like how are they converting users and things like that? So thinking at the top level about the product and the company and what it's trying to achieve and the problem it's trying to solve. And then go a little bit more into detail and like looking at different, why is it structured this way? Why is the navigation there? Why is the hierarchy of the pages structured in this manner? And so you start to like dive into the different aspects of that and think about what could be improved within that. And so that's a good way to like practice your critical thinking. I think in prepping for those interviews, I went through a lot of apps doing that and looking at examples for how people think about it. And that was just super helpful, like, again, to prep for the interviews, but also just to practice my own product thinking. And like, before diving into like the nitty gritty details of the UI, even like thinking about like, well, what is Venmo trying to do? Like it's dealing with money, but more it's almost like a social media platform for money, and money transfers. And so that was something that I wouldn't have thought about as much on like a top level, but that really informs like the hierarchy of how the pages are laid out and stuff. So it's a really interesting exercise. Yeah, I'll try to find the Medium article that I was looking at, but and it's something anyone can practice. So do it with your friends, or even just do it by yourself.
Right. And that like brings you back, like that's why you learned that from Medium. And it's crazy because like there's one question specifically that's saying like, if you are at university and you do have Medium and YouTube and everything, but if you are at university, what kind of subjects should you kind of prioritize if you want to get into the UX industry? And I was wondering if you guys had specific like classes that you think really helped you with how your skill set is now as a product designer or a UX UI designer. Yes, Sonika?
So one of the biggest subject can be human-computer interaction. So that can be a big gateway into the UX design. The other could be any design classes like that could build your visual design or branding or that skill set. And the third one would be research course. So if you don't find any research course, you can also go and volunteer in any of the labs and just say that I would like to learn the research methodology. So all this combined together will really make you a good UX designer. With like you can build your portfolio artifacts with all these skill sets.
Well, that's awesome. And Aditi, what do you have to say?
So a class that really helped me was a class called Design Strategy, where we learned how to balance our designs with like the business needs. And I think that is so important for designers. And our professor always said, like, as designers, we tend to think very ideally, like we have this ideal vision for our design, but a lot of the times we don't take into consideration like the business and the technological constraints. And so I think like learning about any business sort of thing is going to be a huge asset for you, especially when interviewing and then when you join like a company.
Awesome. I think that's a really great question. So I think another question that I do want to forward specifically to Cole actually is someone says, I'd like to know what kind of projects you do as an accessibility designer. And I say like roughly, that's the quote, and roughly. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about projects specifically to accessibility design. And I know, Vicky, you do also have a project in that realm. So if you would like to talk about that, that would be great.
So I definitely think there's like two different kinds of ways that project could be separated. So like for one example I have for a project would be is how does the app that you're using is kind of working with the accessibility standards. So for example, is how could you make this project much more accessible for someone who is blind? And it gets kind of like nitty gritty in terms of code, but it's kind of like explains, and it's more like visual hierarchy and making sure everything makes sense and like the code is actually accessible. So it's not like nested in divs. Mm-hmm. Or another route accessibility project could be routed to is I did a project where you kind of come up with an inclusive concept of like trying to integrate an idea to work for other people who are in segregated groups. And how could you use I wouldn't say use their struggles, but like you kind of learn from their struggles to mm-hmm. creating a different type of concept. And then there's another type of project you can do. It would be so I think there's a really big disconnect between designers and engineers. Mm-hmm. And like you could sometimes so designers would hand off the design to the engineers, then the engineers would just create something based off the designs, but there is really no more communication after based off the designs. Like how does this supposed to work in terms of accessibility? Like, so let's say you're interacting with a person who uses keyboard. So someone who is cerebral palsy, how would this design be interacted in terms of keyboard? So just something, that's how like some accessibility projects would be broken apart. You can do a lot of stuff with accessibility. There can be like design systems. We create an accessible design system for it's like accessible design on how
I think the internet is a little bit
go about creating a button to be accessible.
Hey, Cole. I think from what I heard from what you were saying is like figuring out how you can make a design system be accessible. And then I remember, like I also heard you saying like even like with the choice of like what you do with buttons, and like I feel like what I'm hearing from what you're saying is like accessibility. You can dive as deep as you want, right? And to like learn more about the different struggles that people have and how you can design around those struggles. So that's awesome. And I think that's like, those are really great things that you covered specifically for accessibility. So now we're actually wrapping up this panel now, and I'd like to perhaps like hear, you know, like maybe just a one sentence thing from all of our panelists for people who, like me, like, you know, want to really do well in the industry. And we can just definitely go ahead in the same order. So Vicky, you can go first.
I think like my one sentence advice is like for like designers, like new designers or like current designer, is that make a goal and, you know, stick with it and just focus on doing it. Don't worry about, you know, like seeing other people accomplishment and feel like, you know, they are doing way like too much like compared to me, and feel, you know, like that imposter's like syndrome. So I would say, you know, just stick with your goal and focus on that goal.
Awesome. That's great advice. And who can go next? I
think Joy is next. So
awesome.
Go ahead, Joy.
My one sentence advice would be just be confident. So like regardless of like which background you're from, just try hard. And I think that's the only thing I could say, because just kind of believe in yourself and just try now and try to like start doing it, instead of just being so like afraid of like starting because you're not from a design background.
That's great. That's definitely very encouraging. Next, I can just go with the people that's on my screen right now. So Deepti, you can go next.
Wait, sorry, I was responding to a chat message. What was the question?
It's like, what would you, as like a one sentence kind of piece of advice, would say to all the people watching and all the panelists that want to like be successful in the industry?
I think don't be afraid to reach out to people. I think it's sometimes like really upsetting when you reach out to someone and they don't respond to you. But even if someone doesn't respond the first time, a lot of times they're just like really busy. Like you would be surprised how many people read a message and forget to respond. So yeah, just like don't be afraid to reach out to people. Reach out to as many people as you can. Just show that you're passionate. And I think meeting other people was the greatest resource to me.
Awesome.
And
that's great. No, don't worry about it. And Joy, you're next on my screen. So what do you have to say as your like token of advice?
Oh, you mean I actually gone? So,
oh my gosh, seriously?
Oh yeah.
That's so funny. Okay, Kari, you're next.
Yeah, I think I would say right now, especially in this time when we're in a pandemic and there's so much going on, there's a lot of resources, and I noticed a lot of like professionals and people from industry and organizations like Superposition are trying to put on a lot of events virtually. So again, I'd say dive into that, like take advantage of all the mentorship opportunities and like initiatives that people are starting right now during this time, especially because there is a lot out there right now. And connect with other people, try to find community, whether it's again getting mentorship from designers, or if even if you're having trouble with that, interacting with other people that are trying to break into the industry, or people that are like students as well. So just try to find community for yourself, because that's where you're going to be able to hear what other people are doing, get tips and tricks, and share work with other people and collaborate with them. So like I see people here even like dropping Google Forms and setting stuff up to help people connect. And so stuff like that is awesome. So just be proactive and dive into all the resources that are available.
Oh, I love that. That's awesome. Okay, next, anybody like who hasn't gone as well. Oh, okay, clap. You can go next as well when you're ready.
I'll go next.
Sorry.
No, you can go.
Okay. I would say just never stop iterating, especially your portfolio. Like it's never like a one and done sort of thing. Like it's always an iterative process. So keep seeking out feedback and keep iterating on your portfolio. Like there's always something you can improve.
That's really great. And Cole, you can go ahead.
So To be very be very passionate and genuine with what you're creating. I feel like there's a very big disconnect between people's projects and their person itself. So just be passionate about what you're doing and genuine with what you're trying to convey.
That's awesome. And Rachel, I know you have your hand up.
Yeah, it's okay. I just wanted to make it easier for you to keep track on who's
No,
trying
I was
to.
like, there's so many boxes, but go ahead.
Yeah, I was just thinking that one really crucial skill is to have a lot of confidence. I often feel like even my work is not enough. And even like, we're all students. Most of us are students anyway, and we're learning. So I think it's okay to be where you are and try to apply with all that you have and just presenting what you have in the best light possible with help from mentors and friends. And just strive to get the best opportunities you can get for yourself.
Oh, that's great. That's awesome. And Sanika.
It's always hard to go last because all the good advices are always out there. So I would just like to add that, we are right now in this pandemic, we are all working from home. And as a student, it can be very isolating. So reach out to people, but also try to find an accountability buddy. So that is a person that is also a student trying to find an internship. So you both can pair and then work together and hold yourself accountable that by next Saturday we have this thing up or that thing up, because having a deadline is one thing, but also keeping those milestones in between is helpful. So that would be my advice.
Well, that's awesome. And Rachel, do you still have your hand up, or you're all good?
All good. Sorry, let me lower it.
Sounds good. No worries. That's awesome. So before we do like our last wrap up, I'm going to hand the mic over to Stephanie, and she's going to talk about some events going on with Superposition.
Thank you so much, Julia, and thank you to all these amazing panelists for sharing their insights. Before we end, I just wanted to make a quick announcement about Superposition. As I introduced before, Superposition is an international nonprofit bridging the gender gap in STEM. We create a lot of educational opportunities, just like this panel, our own ongoing webinar series, and the Bay Area's largest all-women hackathon. Most of our audience is in high school or university, but this summer we're expanding our initiative to be more inclusive of younger students. My team and I are teaching an Intro to Python and a STEM sampler course to introduce young students to the amazing world of STEM. If you know of any students who might be interested, please pass these links on the screen to them. If you want to keep up with Superposition and our latest virtual opportunities, please do follow us on social media or shoot us an email. And with that, I'll be handing it back to Julia to wrap us up.
Awesome. Well, I'm just so happy and very thankful that I could be here with such amazing interns that are like giving their time and their words of wisdom, again, from the kindness of their hearts. And I think that we are all learned an amazing amount of things today. And if you could give Superposition a lot of love, I'd like to also give like jazz hands or like being able to clap my hands for Vicky, because Vicky is the one that also was curious about, what other interns were talking about or what other interns are experiencing. So I'd like to also thank her for one, kind of like getting this panel all together, Stephanie for organizing everything, and then obviously all of the panelists, but also all of you guys. Thank you so much for coming here, for being very engaged, and for just like taking the time out of your Saturday evenings. Oh, we're all nerds here. So we're really happy, and I'm really glad that I could have this opportunity with you all today. So without further ado, I hope you guys have a great, beautiful rest of your weekend. And thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, you guys.